who gather here in the Zendo to study, and we've been doing this for a few years now. We study also Monday nights and Tuesday nights as a group at 8 o'clock each night, and then also on Saturday morning at 11. And then there's a Dharma talk by one of the temple residents, monks, other than myself. And we get together and study. People sit and study. I'm not there for the first 45 minutes, and then I come in the last 2 minutes to help with answer questions or check up on everybody. So it's a very helpful way, as those of you, people who talk to people who study this way over a period of time, it can be very frustrating, but it's also very helpful because we go very, very slow. You know, when you read a book, you kind of, a how-to book or a Dharma book or any kind of book, we tend to move right along. And if we read a paragraph or two, we might go over or read it again, but unless we're being tested on it, probably not. Just, you know, we didn't get it, so probably wasn't written very clear, right? Do a good job of writing it. So, but Dharma books, especially books like this book, this is from the 13th century, the founder of our lineage. This is called The Treasury of the True Dharma Eye, or Shobo Genzo. And it is his main writing. He also wrote another one called The Extensive Record, which is equally as heavy. But the amazing thing about Dogen Zenji, the founder, as I said, of our lineage, of the Soto lineage of Japan, the amazing thing about his way of teaching was very similar to my personal teacher, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, Tibetan Buddhist master, meditation master and scholar from Tibet, who passed away in 1987. So one thing they had in common, they had a lot in common, but this particular thing was they were able to teach relative truth and absolute almost in the same sentence. And of course, this was very helpful and absolutely frustrating to be able to get a sentence that would contain a relative understanding of the world and an absolute or deep or transcendent understanding of the world, somehow captured almost poetically in that case, Japanese language. And translations of this particular one, we have a couple of different, this was by Tanahashi. And what is the other one?
It's by a Reverend.
It's okay. So anyway, there's other translations. So a particular line that we were studying today, I think it was Kevin was asking questions about this, but maybe think that maybe it'd be good to talk about, use this as a topic of the talk rather than something else. But that being said, I'm also happy to answer when we get to the question and answer part. I'm happy to respond to your questions if you have questions about anything, even if it doesn't deal directly with this, has to do with Buddhism or meditation practice, anything but finance or politics. I have no opinions. Opinions I have are wrong. So it says to study the way of enlightenment is to study the self. Again, to study the way of enlightenment. Enlightenment, the way I would translate the word enlightenment so that you can all really understand what that means, sanity, completely sane. Someone who is enlightened is not a special highfalutin person with light rays coming out of their ears. It is a person who is sane, who is operating in a way in which they create no warfare. None with themselves. They're completely in harmony with themselves, whatever that self may be, and they're completely in harmony with others. That doesn't mean they won't give you a rough time. When I say that, I'm just saying that they don't necessarily go along with everything. They don't necessarily are all that agreeable. They may be, if they're functioning as your teacher, they're probably not agreeable at all. To study the way of enlightenment is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be actualized by myriad things. When actualized by myriad things, your body and mind, as well as the bodies and minds of others, drop away. No trace of enlightenment remains. And this no trace continues endlessly. When you first seek the Dharma, you imagine you are far away from its environs. At the moment when Dharma is authentically transmitted, you are immediately your original self. In other words, everything suddenly becomes clear. So to forget the self is the title I think I gave to the talk on, put on the internet or on YouTube or wherever it shows up. It's on YouTube, is that correct? To forget the self is to be actualized by myriad things. So the idea there, what's being said there in this way is is to not be too concerned with what's happening here, not to look away from it, not to spend too much time interpreting it or trying to move it or get rid of it or shift it or justify it or condemn it or blame oneself or blame others, but rather to see completely what is occurring moment by moment by moment. The only way that I can say, cover your mouth when you yawn. It's the second time I've had to tell you to do that.
I didn't know you were serious about
Oh, was I just because I was smiling? I wasn't serious. It's for you to figure out whether I'm serious or not.
He only yawns when you're speaking.
That's very thin ice you're walking on, Kevin. Remember, you're in front of a whole lot of people, and I'm extremely good at uncovering things. Is it going to be a Dharma war? So, uncovering or seeing the way in which we've been covering things up seems to come about through and is encouraged by this sitting practice of meditation. What we just experienced here, those of you who were here for the sitting practice, it's very simple. We come in, we sit down, we follow this very, very simple instruction, shikantaza, just precisely this, holding the body very still, which is something we don't do all day long. We're constantly, even though we're sitting still on a park bench or in our car or in our taking a lunch break from our work or wherever, there's still a slight shifting. You know, we're going this way, we're going this way, we're moving our feet a little bit, tapping. Any kind of movement that isn't something that is natural, like a heartbeat or breathing, any kind of movement interferes with the clarity that sees what is happening in the six sense fields, their objects, what happens in particular, the mind. If there's any kind of movement going on, it's not that it's wrong. We're not saying it's wrong. We're just saying, I'm just saying that it makes it harder to see more clearly because the body and mind are not separate. They look like they're separated, and we're always separating ourselves. We're always doing one thing, thinking something else. Notice that? Driving to the store, not driving. We're not actually there in the traffic. It's a wonder there aren't more accidents. But we've kind of learned how to put this on automatic and how to get to Myers or wherever we're going and still be able to think about what we're going to say to so-and-so when we see them again, or how we need to get the lawnmower repaired, or on and on and on and on about things. Filling up space, yes.
Should we not move at all during meditation?
That's a good question. Thank you. Excuse me. The primary word for you to remember, other than meditation, you should meditate. Everyone here should meditate. That's probably the last thing I'll ever tell you to do. It's an order. Do it. But when you do sit down and meditate, then the idea of movement, the idea of thoughts, the idea of whatever is moving automatically or with in a natural kind of way, like breathing and so on like that, that's appropriate. But anything that is extra should be curtailed. But it should be curtailed, or it should be held down or held back or controlled in a very gentle and respectful way. So it's not about Sometimes we hear stories especially Zen monasteries where everyone has to sit very still for 40 minutes, and if they move at all, then they get yelled at, or somebody comes and hits them with one of these sticks. So the idea of not moving at all would be not so much that, but moving as little as possible. So you might say if you were you're doing sitting meditation, you're holding up very still, about 10 minutes had passed, and you were one of your legs was starting to go to sleep or maybe ache, and it was unreasonable. It's not making any sense as far as your body awareness to really sit through that. You really need to stretch your leg. So it's not about, this is the way I teach this, it's not about holding still no matter what. This is misunderstanding. So just a misunderstanding. So as little as possible. And then if you do have to move, say you do have to stretch your leg, say your back is really bothering you, you really need to stand up for a minute and stretch, move a little bit because you're so uncomfortable. Then I would say do that, and then sit back down, and return to square one, just very still. And go another 10 minutes, 12 minutes, maybe 15 minutes. Maybe you might find that if you aren't too concerned about moving or not moving, and your intention, original intention is just to hold very still and observe what moves, not that difficult to sit still. We just sit there and we observe that the mind goes there and the mind goes there, and then we think about this, and then we completely forget about our body. And we're in Arkansas, not a good place to go particularly. But you're there, or you're reliving a vacation, or you're actually living a vacation, what I call remembering the future. You haven't gotten there yet, but you're daydreaming about it, like maybe you would be going to Honduras. He's going to Honduras tomorrow. Don't yawn down there either. So the primary word to remember is awareness. Awareness is so important and is misunderstood. Where the sitting practice of meditation is not about, this is not a belief system. Buddhism is not a belief system. It looks like it. There's someone coming in and knows nothing about it, would project onto, well, they believe in some guy, whatever, and they bow down and worship somebody. Not the case at all. It is a structure, a form whereby we can discover the truth for ourselves. If you are a Buddhist, then it just means you're a student of a person who lived a long, long time ago, who made an incredible discovery about the nature of reality. What did he discover? I can say it in just a couple of words. Might be the rest of your lifetime trying to understand it. Not separate. Everything is dependently arisen. There is not a separate thing anywhere. Everything that looks like a thing is dependent on everything else for its apparent singularity or identity. Bringing awareness to that particular understanding, that concept, and then bringing your awareness to how is that showing up here? Do I see that here? Everything looks very separate to me. It looks like good thoughts, bad thoughts, pleasure, pain, success, failure, on and on and on, all the polarities. How does this not separate thing fit into this? Find out. As I said, it is not a belief system. Sometimes it shows up that way, and some lineages of Buddhism posit or promote a little bit of belief going on. But I like to say it this way: if you don't believe anything and you don't disbelieve anything, what is operating there at maximum is awareness, because you don't have anything else to hang on to. You have no reference points. If you don't believe or disbelieve, what do you got? Just this. And it is showing up in the form of an apparent separation. A red shirt, a black shirt, turquoise, and salmon. So if things are showing up by what? By contrast. If we begin to see things through contrast, then your natural intelligence, your original face, as it says, your original nature, your original mind can start to spring forth, because it is not hindered by the hope and the fear that operates out of ego or self-centeredness. Ego and self-centeredness, clinging to self, protecting a self, promoting a self, defending a self, blaming a self, excusing, blaming this self, that self, someone else's self, all of this warfare that's going on kicks up an awful lot of dust called karma. And karma is a Sanskrit word that just means action. It just means shit happens. Yes.
How is observing the mind studying the self?
Because it's the self is appearing as the little self, the me and my stuff, me and my ideas, what I like, what I don't like, and it's also appearing as a big self or big mind or universal mind or the Tathagata Garbha or the fundamental nature of reality, not separate. So we have to start somewhere. So we start by studying this crazy mind that comes and goes. And we watch it and we watch it until we eventually start to have insight that it is not solid, that it gets its identity from passion. I want it. It gets its identity from aggression. I don't want it. It gets its identity from ignoring or shutting off or separation or division. The worst kind of math there is, other than adding. That's not too good either. Evil math. More?
I don't remember how it showed up in the text, but I think Dogen was talking about gaps
Yes.
arising through practice.
Yes.
What are those gaps in relationship to passion, aggression, and ignorance?
They're just gaps in the continuity of anything. If quite often we maintain our reality by remembering the past, and like I said, remembering the future. It's the same thing, same mechanism. If you think about something that's going to happen and you remember something that already happened, how do you know the difference? You can't tell from the memory. There's something else happening there. What is it? It's belief in a self. Belief in that somebody was back there and somebody's going to be up there. When you discover, when you see, when you understand, when you grok, you know grok?
Yes.
Yes. Is that Heinlein? Heinlein?
Stranger in a strange.
Stranger in a strange land. When you understand, when you perceive, when you gather this understanding, then at the moment when Dharma or truth is automatically, authentically rather, transmitted, you are immediately your original self. It's your original face, your true identity, who you actually are, outside of time and space, outside of this body mind. Evan.
What transmits Dharma?
Everything.
What is Dharma?
Truth. Keep coming.
How is truth transmitted through Dharma?
By seeing that it's a lie. You didn't understand what I just said, so don't just jump to another question. Yeah, Mr. Leo. Keep coming. See, I told you you were walking on thin ice. I'm not trying to devalue what you said. That's a good question there, but keep coming this direction. You can.
How do we make ourselves available to the transmission of Dharma?
Very good. Hold your seat, stay where you're at. Wait is one way of saying it. It's not actually a waiting. It's just not separating yourself from things. It feels like a waiting when we first start. Even meditation feels like we're waiting for something. What's supposed to happen? I've been doing this for 3 years now. So far, so good. The other teaching that Dogen has is when we go out towards things, towards the world, this is called delusion. When the world comes to us, this is called awakening. To be awakened by the 10,000 things, by the myriad things. To actually allow things to come towards you is when we begin to understand. We receive the transmission, the true Dharma eye starts to open when we stop chasing down this and objecting to this and agreeing with that and trying to use relative truth to squeeze some kind of happiness out of samsara. This world is not happy, and you can't get happiness out of it. Have you noticed? I'm older than everybody here. I've noticed. So what is happiness? How are you going to be content? What is it? Is it possible?
What is happiness?
Lack of sadness. So happiness is not needing to be happy. No demand on anything. A complete, completely cooperative, but use the simple word, attitude towards everything. Anything, even when something arises that is completely hindering your intention to do a certain thing or mow a certain lawn, something doesn't work out, to completely understand what that is. Happy. It's not the relative happiness that comes and goes. It's the kind of understanding that is completely with whatever arises, no longer objecting to anything. People who object to different things, and even if they're objecting to some horrible situation or person or crime or whatever, are objecting to themselves. They're actually disagreeing with their own Buddha nature. Not that the acts of pain or suffering or evil, whatever word you want to append to that. It's not that those aren't difficult and shouldn't be addressed. It's just that they're not other. That's the misunderstanding. We think that we're this and they're that. That's why we have so much warfare in the world, so much tension. It boils right down to, in a simple sense, is that we are happy one minute and sad the next. This is the very nature of the world, buying into relative truth and trying to attain or receive happiness through what's called the 8 worldly dharmas: pain and pleasure, success and failure. They actually think that you can somehow win or be successful. The first words out of the Buddha's mouth, according to the tradition, is his first teaching was, life is suffering. Life is pain. Anytime there's a situation where consciousness is appearing through nerve endings, any kind of sensitivity to the 6th sense fields, you're kind of in for it. You're a living being. So at least the consciousness, the Buddha nature, is appearing as a living being, as a human being, as a duck, as a mouse, as a raccoon, as a horse, as a mosquito. Yes.
We have a question from Jigme up in Traverse City.
Yes, Jigme.
He asks, how does being completely sane relate to crazy wisdom?
Crazy wisdom is a phrase used in the Tibetan tradition, in particular by my teacher, one of my first teachers, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. It's just basically saying that one who is completely awake, who is no longer at war with anything, who is completely in the service of this world, who operates completely out of compassion. How their functioning appears is so clear and so much operating out of no center, no fringe, that to an ego-centered mind, someone who is grasping at itself, someone who's at war with himself, someone who's at war with others, someone who is attached to right and wrong and to blame and not to blame. If you're attached to that, then the whole world is going to appear to you as a battlefield. And if the crazy wisdom guru appears before you, he will seem crazy based on the value system of ego, because he won't fall in line with that system. So he will appear like he's nuts. He's not doing what everyone else is doing. He's doing something different. Or when everybody else is being peaceful, he's being an ass. Or not. Doesn't seem to be a protocol for that, but crazy wisdom It's just a way of teaching that will help you if you're a practitioner, if you're a student of the Buddha Dharma, if you have a teaching person, that you need to give that person the benefit of the doubt. In other words, if you ask someone to function as your teacher, all judgment of that person should stop, because that person starts to function as a mirror for you. And if you start to think they're making mistakes, you're probably looking in a mirror. So this looks like, it looks crazy. I actually have had people function as students of mine until they didn't like the teaching and they left. And as far as they're concerned, I was a bad teacher. I did this, or I did this, or I said this, or I said that. You're either ready to be a student or you're not. Yes, sir.
How does a teacher function as a mirror?
By interacting with the student in such a way that the student is able to see what their fundamental issues are, or get more clear about what is actually happening with them. Why don't you tell me how it looks, Mr. Yawning person?
Is that a fundamental issue?
Huh?
Is that a fundamental issue?
Well, one of your body cavities is wide open. It's embarrassing. That's embarrassment is something you need to work with.
How do I work with that?
You're doing it. Keep doing it. Just come back alive from Honduras.
What does it mean to forget the self?
Forgetting the self, I think, is just being completely with whatever's happening. You're here. You're in your five sense fields and your sixth sense consciousness, and all are just operating very, very simply, all inclusive. You see colors, you see shapes, you hear sounds, you smell, you taste, you touch, you feel. You don't forget gravity. You actually are totally embodied in your body with no agenda about success or failure. No hope, no fear. No hope, no fear. I'll say it again. No fear, no hope. More.
Do you forget the dependently arisen self?
Yeah.
Is there something? Is
Yeah,
there?
you do. There's self that's not dependently arisen.
Is there a self that's not dependently arisen?
I don't ask you.
Think about, sometimes you talk about that a self may arise dependent on the situation. That's how the teaching may arise, that it's what the situation
It would require,
invites
yeah.
or requires.
So it's very unpredictable. Yes.
Is that self forgotten?
I think it is. I think one is completely spaced out from the point of view of ego or self-centeredness. This is why it's so challenging, because the ego doesn't want to let go of reference points. Yeah, I'll do this, but I'm not letting go of that. I'm not, because that's too dangerous. That's too threatening. I can't do that. I can't do that part. Michael.
So I look at Richard's red shirt, and if I say I like it, that's the self. But if I just look at the shirt, is that forgetting the self?
Something that's closer. Yeah, you just the word appreciation just means to allow something to be what it is. You can appreciate cow manure. You just let it be what it is. It just smells a certain way and it looks a certain way. Excuse me. There's no reason to do much with it at all. Just like with his shirt, or with any other color or situation or condition, even food or music. Actually, if you appreciate music, there's going to be some kinds of music that you maybe don't care for, but your sense of understanding, your sense of inclusion or appreciation doesn't go to war with it. Wouldn't really reject it. You wouldn't really accept it. Go ahead.
When I make the case, say that I see the chaos, that's just the self.
Paraphrase yourself.
People are doing stupid things,
I know.
and
It's
you
irritating.
describe that as, I describe that as chaos.
Okay.
Because I've made that judgment, is that just ego?
Well, it may be, but what's your point? I mean, you're asking a question, but what yes, it is. Anytime you push any direction, there's a quality of self-centeredness happening all the time because you're busy jockeying around for position. They're right, I'm wrong. That's this is this. I don't like that, I like this. People are doing this constantly. There's nothing wrong with liking one thing more than the other, but a lot of awareness is there so that we really appreciate or understand what it is that we're rejecting, not to mention what we appreciate or what we enjoy. Since you,
If the self has been forgotten, has other been forgotten?
forgotten everyone's self. So forgotten is a way of saying you don't have to really focus on that. You don't have to really worry about yourself. You don't have to get rid of, as somebody sometimes said, you don't have to get rid of an ego. You don't have to get rid of your ego because the ego isn't real. You just see that your whole, who you think you are is as Trungpa Rinpoche once said, is a paranoid insurance policy. We have this kind of protection going on about ourselves. So if someone, disses us or dismissive or someone else praises us, we can kind of feel, if I were to praise you or condemn you right now, even if it was just making it up, what you feel is your self-centeredness. Just like I was making fun of Shoka, even though he knows I'm teasing him still, he's still pretty sensitive to that. So I think you can probably feel a little bit of that, can't you? A little self-centeredness that appears as embarrassment, like everybody's looking, wondering why he didn't close his mouth or cover his mouth when he. More on that, essentially.
Maybe I missed it when Sokuzan was asking his last question about the dependently arisen self. In terms of the self, is there anything other than the dependently arisen self?
A little louder, and I didn't really follow you myself.
Well, I'm wondering if the self is solid and continuous is multifaceted. Is there anything other than the dependently arisen self to see through?
So just dependently arisen is just everything is coming and going and depending on everything else for its appearance. You can't have this without a whole lot of other things. There has to be a tree. There has to be someone to carve it. There has to be a hand to pick it up to show it to you. There has to be a table to sit it on. So there's so many dependent things, and we kind of stick everything together so we don't have to look at all these different parts that have to come together in such a harmonious way for anything to be what it is. And that includes the form, feeling, perception, concept, consciousness that make up the five aspects, the traditional way of talking about the ego. There's a form, there's feeling, perception, there are concepts or words or memory, and then there are the six sense fields and their objects. All this is a very complicated situation that can actually be broken down into parts. Those five things getting together have, because of the nature of consciousness, actually thinks there is a person, a solid person who could win or lose.
It seems to be pretty easy to get caught up in thinking about losing ourselves or losing our stuff
Yeah.
or losing, just being afraid of that kind of stuff.
A little louder, please.
So, it's easy to get caught up in being concerned about losing your stuff,
Yes.
yourself, life.
Yes.
How does seeing or trying to see how things are dependently arisen relieve us from that story, that constant story?
Okay. So one of the things that's happening is if you're looking at that everything you see is dependently arisen or dependent on everything else, then you're taking the awareness and you're using the conceptual part of the awareness, that part of the awareness that sees objects as separate. Because awareness just sees, or just hears, or just smells, just tastes. The whole self-centered part is something that is kind of concocted out of fear. And so, but if you're just looking at the way things arise and the way things fall away without adding to it, without subtracting, without dividing, without doing any math at all, you're just an observer. You're just watching what's coming and going. Then, just through by virtue of taking that approach to everything, it's that much sooner that you will begin to see that the who you think you are is also dependently arisen. That person you thought you were is actually just it's like discovering that it's like discovering that something you thought was real was just a mask. It was just a costume. You thought your life was real, and then you really looked at your life and you saw that it was just a stage set. And then you've just been watching and believing the drama in your own life.
So seeing how one thing doesn't cause another thing, it'll cause our story about the self to fall apart.
It's just seeing cause and effect. The way things appear as separate things is because it looks like this caused that. And it's not that it didn't, but we totally ignore all the 15 billion things that cause this one thing. And all of the 15 billion things that one thing happening is going to cause going out in this and others. Everything is completely dancing with itself all the time. It's very, very complicated. And there's no way you can find the original source of anything. That's why all dharmas are all in Buddhism, there's a teaching called all dharmas are without blame. You can't find first cause for anything.
Another question.
Go ahead.
So people have been observing outer space and inner space for probably as long as there's been people. And to me, that seems like a pretty strong indicator of things being dependently arisen. Is there a way that we can use that observation to help ourselves see that things are dependently arisen?
Sitting meditation. It's very interesting to look at the wall and then go out and look right up at the sky. Same thing. I mean, they're different, but it's just looking at something. Except this is a couple feet away, and that is you don't know how far it is away. It's a perfect example of relative truth. It's endless. Something we totally dismiss and ignore all the time. Completely endless nature of who we actually are. Unborn, unceasing. More? Kevin?
Is awareness a quality of the mind?
Well, we start to get into the definitions of things, and we've got the word like the mind. Oh, what the hell's that? It's the mind, and of course, modern scientific materialism wants to nail everything down. So it does. It categorizes everything. If you have split personality, they call it dissociative identity disorder, schizophrenia, psychosis, or whatever. They need to do something with it because it's what? Materialistic. Anytime you, spiritual materialism, scientific materialism, psychological materialism, always needs to know. Even if it's, we can't know that. Or we don't know that yet. That's another kind of knowing. And so it's very much, there's a whole lot of aggression in that, and a whole lot of manipulation, and a whole lot of control, and not a lot of respect for the nature of the world. That's why it's rare to find people who are actually on a spiritual path. A lot of people are on a simulated spiritual path that is very materialistic, all based on gain and loss, just like merchandising. More?
I'll ask it in a different way. Is awareness dependently arisen?
No. The quality of awareness that where I'm aware of this bell, and now I'm not aware of the bell, but I have a memory of the bell, so I guess I'm somewhat, now I'm aware of this, and now I'm aware that you're sitting there and I can't really see what you're doing. There's lots of awareness. So there's a quality of awareness that has to do with mentation, or with conceptualizing, or sensing, and it's operating through all the consciousnesses. Just like the sense of smell can't necessarily think, or can it? The sense of thinking can't necessarily see, but it sure thinks it can. The mind thinks it's actually seeing. The mind doesn't see anything. The mind can't see anything unless it does. And I mean it that way. I'm not just being silly. It can't see anything unless it does. Not to. You have to always come back. This, besides awareness being one of the most important words you can remember, other than meditate a lot, is have to remember that anytime you posit anything, it automatically creates its opposite, or right back to duality again. And if you try to say this is right and that's wrong, we're right back to warfare. You have to see that those are two aspects of the same thing. It's called what the modern simple way of the people say all the time: two heads of a coin, or two sides of a coin. Those two. What do they say?
Seems.
I'm transcendentally dyslexic. Huh?
I don't know that way.
I don't know.
Two sides of the same coin. Maybe.
See, you know about philosophical stuff.
Yeah.
More.
So is that to say that
Question.
it's not as important to understand what awareness arises out of, but that there is this thing, awareness?
We just use that as a concept, but awareness is completely completely amazing. We can't really, an eye can't see itself. Awareness can't really find itself or see itself. It doesn't really need to, because everything you look at is like a mirror. Everything is very mirror-like. It's all, because it's not separate. So when you realize who you are, you're still here. You're still in the body. You still eat. You're still going to die. You're still going to have pain. You're still going to have happiness. You'll have all kinds of relative things going on. But the attachment's gone. And it's not because you detached. It's because you saw the way you were hanging on. If you see the way you're hanging on, you won't hang on. You won't have to do that. You'll just see what, if you said anything, if you thought anything, would be more like, well, why would I do that? But you notice that if you have a big, huge piece of shit in your hand, it's a good example, right? Am I using a good example? You're not going to have to say, I probably should put this down. You aren't going to have to think about it. I'm sorry to use such a disgusting example, but you aren't going to have to think about it. Or if you have or if there's a rattlesnake laying on your stomach and you wake up, you're not going to have to think, oh my, there's a rattlesnake there. Probably should remove the rattlesnake, or get my stomach to let go of that rattlesnake. No, you're going to probably go out from the rattlesnake. Again, not a very good example. None of those are good, especially the shit on that. So don't use that. No quote. But I'm just saying that it's like you don't have to say, well, I guess I'll just have to let go of that. This is just, it's pretentious and it's extra, and it's all about ego trying to be the person who wonderfully lets go of things. Oh, I'm so good. I used to hang on, but now I don't. This is just baloney. But if you really see what it is you have, that you're actually walking into a bonfire, you won't have to say to yourself, I shouldn't walk in the bonfire. You just won't go there. But most of the world, the people who are not on a spiritual path, are walking into a bonfire. I'm not saying they should do what we're doing, but with no true spiritual path to help them. Everyone is headed towards a great difficulty and suffering on some level. Over and over and over again. It's just a mess.
From Gyokudo up in Minneapolis.
Yes, Gyokudo.
She asks, when I'm in pain, I don't forget the self so easily. How do I work with that?
Just stay with the pain. When I say stay with, just the pain, it depends on what it is. If it's physical pain, that's no problem. It kind of insists on your attention. But if it's emotional pain, you can also work with that. You can look at the texture of that. We all have that. We all have emotional pain that sometimes is kind of unfounded or with no basis. Sometimes we're jealous for no reason, or sometimes we're depressed, which can be extremely painful, and there's no reason for it. It's just that we just feel terrible. We feel useless. We feel like we don't want to live, or we feel. And what quite often happens with people is they want to cover that up. And scientific materialism is quite happy to give you meds to cover that up with. The sad thing is it doesn't really even cover it up. It just makes you have other kind of symptoms, which they don't tell you about. But you could actually through sitting practice and meditation there's no guarantee that's going to necessarily excavate you or lift you out of your suffering, but it will give you a relationship to the suffering that will have more sincerity, and you'll have a more genuine, sincere, and honest relationship to what is happening to you, rather than the blaming one, or accusing this, or blaming yourself, or blaming someone else, or blaming your life, which is what happens to us quite often. Yes.
A question from Talib up in Lansing.
Yes, Talib.
It's two-parted. He says, asks, is it normal to reach a point in Zazen and life where you see things more as they are rather than how they are represented? In other, while someone or something may seem one way, but you see through the BS that's presented.
Yes. Dearest. Any other questions?
Only one from Brett McGinnis out in Philadelphia.
Brett, where have you been?
And he asked, do you know the story of Dogen encountering the old monk who was drying mushrooms? You know that story?
Not coming back to me.
He's
Lots of stories.
If you do, could you explain it?
Tell me the story.
He doesn't. That's all he said.
Well, let me see. Old monk. Anybody know the story of the monk drying mushrooms? Are you trying to one-up me by showing these people that you know more than I do about Dogen? Be real careful, Brett. I'll come over and give you what for. There's quite a lot of teachings or stories about the monk who said this or did this and acted in this way or that way, and the teaching person who acted in this way or in that way. They're used to develop some kind of a teaching. So, Brett, if you'd like to tell me that story or remind me, or if it's in the Shobogenzo somewhere, or in his extensive record, which is probably where it's at. If it's running into it here, I'd be happy to talk about it or explain it or whatever. Yes, Anna Maria.
Question about self-forgetting.
Go ahead.
How does the self-forgetting, as we've been talking about it today, that can happen through meditation, how does that relate to what appears to be a self-forgetting when you're very involved in a creative act, whether it's Kabbalah or painting, where the creator disappears and it's just the creation, the creating?
What about it?
Is that
That's
simpler?
it's no different than cooking eggs. It's no different than burning the trash, or it's no different than watering the lawn, or taking a bath, or scrubbing the ceiling. You scrub your ceiling, right? So in other words, it's just a very simple relationship to something that is respectful. You're doing something that needs to be done, and you're doing it, and it's not separate. You're not separate from that. So you won't know when the self vanishes. You won't really know, and say, you won't necessarily say, oh my, I used to have a self, but it's gone now. It just vanished one day, and now I'm quite selfless and quite egoless. No, you'll see that it's unreal, and you'll no longer you'll no longer send bucket loads of gasoline into that bonfire with passion, aggression, ignorance, blaming, accusing, analyzing, condemning, rejecting, all the warfare that's going on. We see it all over. All you have to do is watch the news for half an hour, and you're ready for shock therapy. Don't do shock therapy, by the way.
Will we always experience it as just flashes and glimpses?
No, the flashes and glimpses won't necessarily stretch out into one big long glimpse, but the flashes and glimpses will just become part of the whole thing. You won't need to have some kind of projected knowledge. In other words, your idea about what it would be like to be completely happy and sane, and what it actually is to be completely happy and sane, probably are not going to line up. One's a projection, and it's called the imaginary nature, and the other one is reality. It is not separate. Not separate. No. The fundamental nature of reality is not separate. That's why we need the 10,000 things or the myriad things to come to us. If you're fussing all the time and fussing around, pushing and pulling, accepting, rejecting, judging, evaluating, denying, agreeing with, disagreeing with, if you're doing this, then there's so much dust being kicked up by this activity that when reality starts to walk and offer itself to you in the form of the myriad things, the 10,000 things, as sometimes traditionally said, you'll miss it because you're too busy fighting with yourself. You're fighting with your, it's like Don Quixote tilting at windmills. You're having imaginary enemies everywhere.
Is true happiness absent of consequence?
It isn't so much absence of consequence. It's, if there's an absence of anything, it's an absence of concern over consequence. But consequences are coming and going, but you're not really, you see such a big picture that when this falls over and that, when this happens, it's not that you're not there emotionally feeling, resonating or having compassion for that person who fell off their bike. But you also have a really big, wide view of everything where you see, you don't see it in the form of a story, like, he shouldn't have gotten on his bike, or it was the wrong time, or the weather was just right for him to fall, or you don't see some kind of a layout or some kind of blocking or something of everything. You just see it very simply as it is. You see that it's not separate from anything else. It's very, very simple. In the Zen tradition, we call it chopping wood, carrying water. Just chop wood, carry water. This is an ancient teaching that is talking about seeing seeing the absolute in the relative. Seeing in the Christian tradition, it would be everywhere you look, you see God. Except we don't say that. But we don't deny it either. A final question from anyone? Is there one on mine?
Oh my. Yeah, here's the story of the mushrooms.
Rat.
It's about 10 minutes long.
Is it really? Might have to save it for another time. Yeah, we're a little past. We're 10 past. So thank you so much. We can dedicate the merit. And Unya will explain what that is since we have some new people. Or else the Dogen can, either one.
In the back of your red chant books is our final dedication of merit. I'd also like to let everybody know we do have our all-day sitting this Saturday from 9 in the morning till 9 at night. And we have some work periods together and eating. So please attend if you can. Also, we have donation boxes in the hallway, and we welcome your gifts to help support what we do.
May the mirrors penetrate into all places so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Sokuzan the 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita.
O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.
I have a question.
Oh, yes.